Queen. Welcome, Funmto. I don't think I pronounced your name properly.
No,
it's lovely to meet you.
Hi, my name is Funmto. It's pronounced Funmto.
Funmto.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll start with the first question. It's going to you. What communication techniques and boundary setting strategies would you advise female professionals to employ in their workspace to safeguard their mental health while advancing their careers?
Okay, Antonia, I'm sorry, you didn't specify who it was going to. You just said you.
Oh,
so I don't know
who's going so sorry. It's going to you, Funmto.
Okay. All right, awesome. Thank you so much for having me, everyone. My name is Funmto Ogunbanwo. Like was mentioned, I'm a clinical mental health therapist and the lead therapist at EBIO Therapy and Wellness. And I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for having me. Antonia, could you please repeat the question? I didn't quite get it.
Sure, no problem. What communication techniques and boundary setting strategies would you advise female professionals to employ in their workplace to safeguard their mental health while advancing in their careers?
Yeah, definitely. So I think with communication techniques, one of the things that I definitely recommend to not just females, but then everyone in general, but particularly with females, because we sometimes struggle with assertive communication. So I always recommend something called I statements, right? So I statements are essentially designed to help you communicate assertively, but in a manner that you are inviting people into your reality, right? So with I statements, you're breaking down how it is that you feel. So if something occurred, right? So let's say there was conflict that occurred, right? And you're trying to tell somebody about it. You're trying to tell them about it in the aftermath. The I statements, you lead with your experience. So essentially it's I feel blank, you insert how you feel because you give reasons about how you feel that way. And then when, so you refer to what happened and then what you need moving forward. The reason why I statements are beneficial is because I statements are focused on you, right? When we're communicating, especially when it comes to assertive communication, it can be very easy to point fingers at the other person, but assertive communication has to do with you, right? So you're communicating assertively how it is that you feel or what your experience was, and also what you need moving forward. In terms of boundaries, I think before you can even set boundaries, you have to identify what those boundaries are, right? So sometimes we may not even know what our own boundary is until it's crossed, right? So think back to one way to identify what your boundary is if you think back to maybe something that happened and your reaction after. Maybe, I don't know, somebody called you, somebody from work called you at 9 p.m. and you found this irritating, right? That may signal that, okay, that's a boundary for you where you don't want to have to deal with work-related things after a particular time, right? So now you've identified what that boundary is. The next step would then be to communicate it, right? Because it's one thing to identify and then it's another thing to actually communicate to the other party what it actually is. So communicating what that boundary is and then also putting in place what possible alternatives could be. So for example, if this same example, if the person calls you at 9 p.m. and you let them know, hey, I would appreciate if, all work-related calls end at, 5 p.m. or 5:30 p.m., right? You've communicated that. After communicating it, you then have to think to yourself, like, okay, what am I going to do if this boundary isn't respected? So for example, sticking with that same example, right? The person can choose to ignore your boundary. You can't really control that, unfortunately. But what you can control is what you're going to do in the aftermath. So is it a thing whereby, okay, if they choose to still call you, you're not going to pick up? Right? That is within your control. So in summary, assertive communication using I statements. I have a graphic that I can show. I'll try to find that, but let me just wrap up. So using assertive communication with I statements and then with boundaries, identifying what your boundaries are, communicating it, and then having a follow through in mind if those boundaries aren't respected.
Thank you very much. So it seems like Antonia's internet just had issues, so I'll just continue so that we are able to preserve the time. So thank you so much for answering that, Funmto. I think you really nailed like setting boundaries, like being able to be assertive, as you said, like as a young person, a young woman, because in Nigeria, they will try you and they'll tell you, don't you know I have a type of you at home? So you have to learn how to like, there's a way I used to say those days, I'll be like, you need to learn how to be polite, but be like, yeah, I understand, but like I'm still like this is what I mean. So I don't know if Antonia is back. Antonia, are you back?
I am.
Oh, so over to you. So Funmto is done, so you can move on with Queen.
I'm so sorry. Can I actually just share my screen real quick to show what the I statements look like? Okay, so okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, awesome. So yes, like I said, I statements essentially are it's a form of assertive communication, but you're leading with how you feel or what your experience was. So I feel or my experience was, you insert what it is when you're referring to what exactly happened, and then because, which is essentially just you giving reason as to why it is that you feel that way, why it is that you had that reaction, and then my needs. So what your needs are moving forward, right? And again, this is more constructive because it's less pointing fingers at the person, and it's more so like, okay, this was my experience and this is what I need moving forward. So I just wanted to share that real quick.
Thank you very much. Okay, it seems that Antonia is still having like internet trouble, so I'll just go ahead to the next question, which is for Queen while she's trying to like join, and hopefully when Queen is answering the question, she's able to regulate our internet. So Queen, this is for you. So would you say that there are specific techniques or practices for integrating mental health into your daily routines that female professionals can incorporate to foster overall well-being rather?
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I hope everyone can hear me. Again, my name is Queen Ernest, and I'm very honored for you having me here in this space to share my experiences with the whole of us. Yeah, so for your question, yes, of course. So I want to first understand that mental health is a part of our lives, right? So it's like something that it's fused up together with our lives. So it's not something that's a separate part of life. And so when you're talking about infusing into your daily life, it's there in your daily life. So I think we have to more like pay attention or prioritize it because it's there. Our minds are always there. Mental health is the health of the mind, per se. And so we just need to prioritize it. And in that case, there's so many steps if we want to go through that. And I think we can never go through all the steps, especially with such a short time. But the things that we should know is it's that we should be deliberate. We should be very deliberate with our lives, right? We should know that our lives belongs to us. That's one thing that I always want people to understand. I will always want us to incorporate in our daily lives that our lives belong to us, right? And so, because our lives belong to us, we should discard the pressure, all those things that stress us up, all those things that are indicators to feel our mental health, all those things that deal with our mental well-being negatively. We should cut off with those things. And one of those things are pressure through comparison, pressure through life, and all of that. And so when we understand that our life belongs to us, we'll be able to live our lives for ourselves, right? We'll be able to set standard goals, all of those things for ourselves, not because I'm 18 and she's 14 and she's doing so well. She has spoken in UN and therefore I have to speak in UN and all of that. And we now set so much goals that are not in line with ours. I always ask this question: who would you be if there was nobody else on the earth? I know that influence is a big deal for us. I mean, as human beings, we cannot escape influence, but we should know the line between influence and, incorporating the lives of people into our lives. So we should take a step back. It's not so hard to know who we are. We can go through memory lane in primary school. What are the things that interest you with your families? When you meet a certain people that you're very familiar, comfortable with, what are the things that interest you in your inner self? What is the thing that excites you? All of these things are indicators to who we really are. And so if we put all these things in place, very mindful of our lives, very intentional with our own lives, knowing that this life belongs to us. I mean, even if you don't speak in the UN and you die, I'm sorry, but you still lived, right? You still live according to your rules, according to the things that's made you happy and all of those things. You shouldn't always think. I mean, all these UN, they're still man-made. Let's face it, right? There's still people. It's other people that made these things so big, so whatever. So why don't you take your own life and carve it for yourself? All of these things affect our mental health. That's one thing I want us to know. And then another thing we don't talk about when we talk about mental health is our physical health. They're together. So let me use this scenario, right? Imagine you come back from work and then your bed is scattered and then you don't have your bath and you just jump on your bed. And then in another scene, imagine you come back from work and your bed is laid and then you take your bath and you jump in. So those two scenarios are not the same thing. So in one, you're feeling clumsy, clustered, and all of this. Our physical health is that tiny drop in the ocean that makes the big things. So we may not pay attention to, but the things we eat, the brushing our teeth. Sometimes you wake up in the morning, you need to brush it, and just brushing your teeth alone just makes you feel better than you were 5 minutes ago. So all of these things, we don't pay attention to them, but it's our daily lives. Those things just, help us in our daily lives. Those are very practical things that can help us infuse mental health, what it is, to our daily lives. And then practicing intentionality, like I've spoken before, organizing yourself, organizing your day, knowing what to do, all of these things, exercise. And this is not me talking about being a gym bro, all of that, just like exercise, just taking deep breaths, all of those things, hydrating yourself. All of these things matters for our mental health. There's a long list that I could mention, but because of time and obviously because of like the space we're in right now, I think those are the things that I need. I think if we start with these things along the line, it's going to open up clearer and clearer for us in succession, and it just make a whole difference for us. So I don't want us to have so much clustering information and then we do nothing with it. So it's better we have one or two things and then we pay attention to those things and then you see how your life goes. So that's me answering that.
Well, thank you, Queen, and apologies to everyone for the network issues, but I'm sure it's fine now. Thank you for that. I really wasn't here when the question was asked, but I'm assuming you were associating mental health with physical health, which is completely true in healthcare spaces, because healthcare, we often tell patients how you feel is going to affect how your body reacts. So it goes hand in hand, and that is a huge tip for anyone. So I'm going to be asking another question to Queen. What role does mindfulness or meditation play in promoting mental health, mental wellness for young women in Nigeria?
Okay, mindfulness it's more like meditation, all of those things, just taking a break with your life and being, like I said before, being very intentional with yourself. So the role the things play are just, again, they're just tiny things that you just have to do. So when you're mindful, it helps you to become self-aware. And we know how great being self-aware is as a person. It does a lot of good to us. All this little mindfulness, all these things that you take a step back to, be very cautious with the things that you do. You're taking meditating exercises. So you're doing things like, for instance, you're just quiet for a bit. You're being mindful to. So I'm taking mindfulness into the, I don't know, should I say the spiritual part where people like meditate and all of that. and then the parts where you're mindful as in being intentional. So anyone that the question covers, I guess same thing. And so when we're talking about those things, I feel like it's very helpful to us. The role that these things play is very helpful to us because it's literally, like I said, makes us self-aware. It also helps our mental health, which is basically what we're talking about. Because when you're self-aware, you're taking more caution with your life, with your environment, with people around you. And just like the first speaker said about, for instance, setting boundaries, you need to be mindful enough to know that, okay, this is a boundary that needs to be set before you set it. So all of these things come wrap up together to help you to be able to be aware of the things that you need to do, to be able to prioritize, to be able to organize, to be able to set those boundaries, to be able to know what you're supposed to do, and to just take a step back and like order your life. The topic of this session says navigating adulthood. To navigate in one part or the other means to plan or control, right? So when we're talking about planning or controlling, those things, mindfulness helps us to plan or control our adulthood hand in hand, both plan and control, and then to together.
Okay, thank you for your response. That is quite insightful. I'd also like to pass the question to the first speaker, Funmto, because she's a mental health professional. So I'll repeat the question again. What role does mindfulness or meditation play in promoting mental wellness for young women in Nigeria?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Queen, for such an insightful answer. And even, the other question that you answered to was very insightful. I was like nodding my head all through. So in terms of, the role that mindfulness and meditation play for young professional women in Nigeria, it plays a very important role, right? Because mindfulness essentially is the state of just being aware. Right? I don't know how many of us live in Lagos, but I live in Lagos. And if you live in Lagos, you know that Lagos is a very distracting city. There's noise everywhere. There's always something that is pulling our attention. And even if you don't live in Lagos, right, the world that we live in as in general is very distracting, right? There's notification here on your phone. Before you know it, somebody is calling you, right? And then before you know it, your Slack notification has gone off. And then there's an email from your boss, right? Or from your client, right? Whatever the case is. The point is, the world that we live in now, there's so many things that are vying for our attention that it can be very simple to function in autopilot mode, right? So for some of us, right, if I were to ask you, what motion do you brush your teeth in? I'm sure we won't be able to answer. Or who can tell me the color of their toothbrush, actually? By show of hands, just if you know the color of your toothbrush, just raise your hand. Yeah, blue. Okay, some people do, right? That is amazing, right? Mindfulness is simply bringing your attention back to the here and now, back to the present, right? So as you're brushing your teeth, right? Queen told us that it's important to keep up with certain physical habits, such as brushing your teeth, right? As you're brushing your teeth, do you know what motion your toothbrush is going in? Do you start from the back? Do you start from the middle? Do you do your tongue first, right? Do you know what color your toothbrush is? Do you know what brand your toothpaste is? Mindfulness is simply just becoming aware of those things, right? Bringing your attention back to the here and now. And it's very important for us as we navigate careers and, professional settings, because like I said, there's so many things vying for our attention. So if you are functioning in autopilot when you're in work, if you're functioning in autopilot when you have to deal with, that client, if you're an entrepreneur, right? It can take away your attention from the here and now, and you can miss certain intricate and important details. So mindfulness just helps bring our attention back to the here and now. And a simple way to do that, to incorporate mindfulness into your routine, I'm not even talking about meditation, but just to incorporate mindfulness into your routine to become more aware of your present state, is to scan your environment using your 5 senses. Right? So a simple question that I always like to ask is, how many colors can you see around you? Right? How many things can you smell? What does your room smell like? Things like that. Just scanning your environment using your 5 senses is just an important way to bring your attention back to the here and now. Oh, Antonia, you're muted.
Sorry about that, guys. So I said that was an amazing reply, especially from someone who doesn't know her toothbrush color. I should be more mindful. Moving going forward with another question to you, Funmto. So how do you recommend female professionals handle and recover from moments of failure and rejection in their careers without compromising their mental health?
Yeah, this is a great question. And, in preparing for today, I was like, okay, I'm really looking forward to this question in particular, because I think that as women, as sisters, we're all sisters here, right? As women, it's very easy to derive our identity or our purpose from the work that we do, right? And while the work that we do is extremely important, if we take away that work, you are still an important person, right? If we take away that career, if we take away that shot, if me as a therapist, if we take away Funmto the therapist, Funmto at her core is still an important person, right? And so that needs to set the stage when we are just navigating career in general and just, our professional lives. And so how we can handle moments, I love that the question phrased it as moments, is to remember that those moments of rejection, those moments of failure, they're moments, right? The thing about moments is that they don't last forever. They might be painful, they might be extremely dysregulating, but it's a moment. So a moment of rejection doesn't mean that this is now the trajectory that your career is going to face, or this is now the trajectory that your professional life is going to face. A moment of rejection is exactly just that. It's just a moment. It's just a part of the story. It's not the entire story, right? If you like reading books, you know that, if there's like a cliffhanger moment, that cliffhanger just usually lasts for a short while, right? And then it's not the entire story. So handling moments of rejection, my suggestion would be to remember that this is a moment, right? This doesn't change who I am at my core. I'm still a person of value. I'm still a person of worth. And then also just to consider other perspectives. Because when we experience rejection, when we experience failure, it's very easy to just hone in and to just zoom in on the failure and the rejection. And we forget that there's a bigger and broader perspective to consider, right? So maybe you didn't get that job because it wasn't the right fit for you, right? Maybe you didn't get that job because, they found somebody else that they found a different professional. And it doesn't mean that you are not a good professional just because they went with another candidate, So it's maintaining those moments of objectivity, considering other perspectives. And again, this isn't to say that those moments are not painful. I like to say that two things can be true at once. We can hold those moments of pain, and we can also hold other perspectives. So it's painful that these people rejected me. It's painful that I, experienced this failure. And this is not the entirety of who I am. This is not the entirety of my story.
Wow, that has some depth to it. So I think as a young adult in Nigeria, having to deal with rejections is something that comes up even daily.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for that response. Really quite deep. So, Queen, I have a question for you to continue on with the trajectory this entire masterclass is based on. So, with your experience, how do you recommend female professionals contribute to breaking down the stigma surrounding mental health in professional settings? So that question is to Queen.
Okay. Stigma is a very big deal in mental health, and that is quite odd because mental health is health. It's the health of our mind, how I like to put it. So it's quite odd to me that it's a hush thing, like people don't want to talk about like the way. So one way I would like for us to break down the stigma is for us to be able to talk about it more amongst our friends, amongst ourselves, your group, your people. Just be able to say that I struggle with, for instance, anxiety, I struggle with panic attacks and all of that. So I'll just like go back a few time and say I actually stumbled into mental health advocacy by mistake, to say, because I was just like was going through a lot of mental health issues like anxiety and panic and all of that. I was just trying to understand what these things I was feeling means, and I accidentally stumbled with money, and that was how like my advocacy started. And so I just realized that, but the more I've done this thing, I just realized that talking about things is a very great start. Talk about it. So one thing I want us to understand in breaking stigma is that mental health is as, I don't want to say casual, but as random or as normal as physical health. So the way you shouldn't hide to talk about going into a chemist to ask for anti-malaria drugs, or you can shout over the counter like, oh my God, I'm having a headache. All of those things. That is exactly the same way mental health is. It's just that it affects our mind. So it's not like our physical body that feels the pain, it's our mind. So that is how random you should be able to talk about this thing. So breaking down the stigma is, first you need to talk about it. And then you need to educate yourself, because if you don't educate yourself properly, you will not even know what to talk about or how to talk about these things. Like there's a recent should I say petition to change the word of suicide from saying committing suicide to die by suicide. So if you don't educate yourself enough, you won't know that committing suicide sounds like a crime word, because you're saying this person committed this thing, just like committing murder, for instance. And so all of this education is very important for us. But when we're educated, one thing I know is that when we're educated, we want to tell other people. Most time people are excited to teach what they know. So when you educate yourself more, you'll be able to, or you'll be more excited to tell other people about these things you feel. So both in your professional settings, your home setting, your school setting, always be willing to talk about these things among your friends. Tell them how you feel about things. Tell them how your mind grows to things. And then you should always know that going to a therapist, going to a psychiatrist, all of those things are not taboos. They're not bad things. Even as a religious person, right? They're not bad things at all. It's as normal as going to your medical doctor, your gynecologist, your dentist, whatever. It's as normal as going to that. So you should break down those walls, all those things that you think that mental health is about, because we're doing some training in this plan. When you ask the children, 97% of them will always say mental health is when someone is mad. So all those misconceptions, all those myths about mental health, you should be able to know enough to break it down, and always be willing to correct people. When we keep talking about these things more, when we keep doing these things more, we keep educating ourselves more, little by little, the walls, one brick at a time, is going down. It's going down. Before we know, mental health is like something that is free and open to talk about. So I think just talking about these things, educating ourselves, and then seeking actual help. There are the ways that we can break down the stigma, because when you've known that, oh, this thing I feel, maybe going into a really tough episode of mental breakdown, you just used to think that this thing was like a possessive thing or something that possessed you, and then you find help and you seek help and you find it, you'll be able to say, oh no, this is not what this is about, right? This thing is not, doesn't mean I'm possessed by a certain bad spirit or something. It's just a random thing that my mind does, or this is just like how I am to this, or I have this mental health condition or disorder, and then you'll be able to find help. And so when we seek help, when we get it, when we talk about it, when we educate ourselves, all of these things help us to break down the stigma. So just don't be ashamed to talk about these things among your friends or among like people around you. I know, because of how it is, it's like a hush-hush topic, but we're here to learn and to do better. So let's all do better in every sphere that we find ourselves, both as students, as parents, as children, as whatever that we are, as teachers, whatever. So we should be able to talk about these things freely and let people know that this is not a hush topic. This is something that will actually elevate our lives to begin to speak about them. So you should be able to speak about this thing, because the more we talk about that, the more it helps us. Because talking about it is very necessary for us. Because when we talk about mental health, for instance, then it means that people are beginning to get help. People are getting better. And what does that mean? The world is getting better, per se, right? Yeah. So it's important that we talk about these things and then break down all these stigmas and all these things that affect us.
True. I completely agree. And it's about time, especially in the age of the internet. Self-care is at the tip of our fingers, but we all need to be able to put ourselves in positions where we are making the best decisions for ourselves. And particularly with the story you gave about finding your mental health advocacy journey through seeking mental health services yourself. And entirely. So we have more questions, and this question is going to Funmto. So, are there specific indicators or warning signs, apologies for the noise, that female professionals should be attentive to when it comes to their mental health? I'll repeat the question one more time. Are there specific indicators or warning signs that female professionals should be attentive to regarding their mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. There are indicators and warning signs that we want to be mindful of when it comes to your mental health. One very obvious one would be changes to your mood, right? And by changes to your mood, I'm talking about, like, are you finding that you are more sad? Right? Like, you find yourself feeling sad more often. Do you find yourself feeling more anxious? Right? And even if you don't have the words to label as anxiety, do you find yourself feeling more on edge or more restless? Right? Or do you find yourself feeling more angry? Right? Things like that. Those are certain indicators that are warning signs that, okay, perhaps something is going on when it comes to your mental health. Other indicators that may go unnoticed, right, is things like changes to your sleep. Are you sleeping less? Are you sleeping more? Right? Changes to your eating patterns. Are you eating more? Are you eating less? Right? Changes to how you consume things like media, how you consume things like, movies, or even just like how you spend your downtime. Do you find yourself isolating more? Are you finding yourself staying away from people? Are you finding yourself, spending more time with people because you might be avoiding certain things, right? So these are warning signs that, may go unnoticed, because things like sleeping more, I like to sleep more. I don't know about you, but things like sleeping more, it can go unnoticed, right? Or even things like sleeping less, right? Because it's like, oh, we're working women, we're professional women, so, the work is demanding. But if you find that is constantly reoccurring, if you're having trouble getting, sustainable hours of sleep. So for example, if you used to be able to sleep through the nights, but now you find that you're waking up at different times, right? At intermissions, that might be like a warning sign that something is going up. And then of course too, there's warning signs like if you're having difficulty with tasks, right? So are you having trouble focusing at work, for example, right? Is a work task taking you longer than it normally would, right? These might be indicators that something is going on. And the thing about these indicators is that because we're women and because, our bodies are wonderfully complex, right? This can also be telltale signs that something else other than like our mental health may be going on. But as Queen has laid out for us, physical health and mental health go hand in hand, right? So even if it's an indicator that something is going on physically, it's still going to affect your mental health as well. But it's just for us to be mindful of those signs, and it really takes self-awareness, being able to pay attention to your body, being able to understand, okay, no, this is not how my body functions regularly. So I need to go seek help, whether that help is, from the physical health practitioner or from the mental health practitioner.
Completely. And that is so true. As you rightfully indicated, Queen did mention the link between mental and physical health. So it is very valid that when you notice all these symptoms, the best thing to do would be to go to a hospital. But to be fair, we're quite busy and dismissive when we come to our own health. So a lot of people, when they are not getting enough sleep, they just trick it up to probably PMS or something. But hopefully, I think one thing anyone can take away from this is to be more mindful and pay more attention to how our body reacts to even our thoughts. So I have one more question for you, Funmto. And this is a topic that has already been casually mentioned in the course of this masterclass. And it has to do with imposter syndrome. How can we female professionals proactively address and manage imposter syndrome?
Yeah. Imposter syndrome, man. We've all experienced it. Show of hands if you've experienced imposter syndrome. My hand is up here, right? We've all experienced it, and unfortunately, it's more common amongst women, right? And how can we navigate imposter syndrome? I think this is where self-awareness really has to come in, and self-awareness really has to shine through, because something that I found both personally and also professionally, in my work in supporting clients, is that sometimes imposter syndrome can mask as something other than what it actually is. So what I mean by that is, I'll use myself as a personal example. So sometime last year, I really wanted to be more intentional about developing myself professionally, right? So more intentional about, furthering my skills as a therapist, just becoming a better therapist and things like that. But then I started to notice that I started to experience imposter syndrome. And then I would have thoughts like, oh, I'm not a good therapist. Oh, I'm not, an expert at this topic. I'm not supposed to be speaking on this. And that was imposter syndrome. But what was actually at the core was, I just wanted to develop. I just wanted to, grow my skills, right? And again, going back to what I said about two things being true at once, is that I can be in a place where I want to develop professionally. And it doesn't mean that I'm not a sound professional, right? I think, in fact, being a sound professional is recognizing that development is something that you're going to do continuously, right? So how we can navigate imposter syndrome is, one, to really be self-aware, to know ourselves, right? To be able to understand that, okay, wait, is this imposter syndrome, or is this imposter syndrome just, masking as something else? So self-awareness. Number two would be to just challenge our narratives and also be more compassionate towards ourselves. Somebody once asked me that, if a friend were to speak to you the way you speak to yourself, would you be friends with that person? And at the time, my answer was no. A lot of us are so mean to ourselves, right? We give other people more grace than we give ourselves, right? And so self-compassion is really just being compassionate to yourself, treating yourself like you would a friend, right? So if it's that you feel you get into a space, you get into a new space and you feel like you don't belong, that doesn't mean that that's the truth, right? It just means that you are reacting to a new space, right? And those reactions are not unheard of, right? But sometimes what may happen is that we now become our own worst critic and we're fueling that fire of imposter syndrome, right? And then, of course, believing in yourself, believing in your abilities. We're storytelling beings. We're always telling ourselves stories. So what story are you telling yourself? Are you telling yourself that, okay, I've worked hard to be where I am. I deserve to be in these rooms? Or are you telling yourself that, oh, they are going to catch you soon, right? You just scaled your way into this place. And that is not entirely true, because if you are scaling, at some point they will catch you, right? And if they haven't caught you so far, then that's evidence that you deserve to be where you are, right? I mean, look at the scammers that have come to light. This is such a random example, but the Tinder swindler, right? I know we all watch Tinder swindler. He got caught eventually, right? And there's this other scam. I don't remember her name. I think it's Elizabeth something, right? She got caught eventually, right? The point is, if that thought of like, oh, you're just scaling through, you don't belong here, people get caught. So if you haven't been caught, if you continue to get into, thank you, Anna. Yes, Anna Delvey. If you continue to get into those rooms, then perhaps we should believe the evidence. Let's believe the concrete evidence that shows that, okay, you know what? You do deserve to be in those rooms, right? So in summary, self-awareness, self-compassion, and then just challenging incorrect narratives that you have about yourself.
Wow, thank you for that. And the references to the swindlers was impactful. And yes, and that I think you would be perfect for because of your robust history with mental health. And we would love you to provide advice on navigating the intersection of personal and professional identities to maintain being authentic in the workplace. Would you like me to repeat that question one more time?
Yes, please. And is it directed at me? I lost you for a bit.
Oh, sorry. It's for Queen.
Okay.
Okay. So, Queen, can you provide advice on navigating the intersection of personal and professional identities to maintain being authentic in the workplace?
Okay. So I think I kind of hinted this when I was talking about the first time. Being authentic is basically not taking in other people's identity to yourself consciously or not. So that intersection between your personal life and your professional life, I got the question correctly. The intersection between your personal life and your professional life is okay. Trying to stay authentic to it is just basically being yourself. I don't think there's this magical thing that should happen. I think it's just you being yourself, you understanding yourself. So if you put everything that you learned about mental health in place, it'll help you to be more self-aware, will help you to be more intentional with your life. I'll be able to plan and control navigating. You'll be able to plan and control the life that you have. So say the things you do at home when someone does this to you. For instance, if someone takes your, what did I say? Okay, at home, right? If someone takes your perfume, say your siblings, you're going to shout at them, you're going to rant, you're going to yell, but you really can't do that in a professional setting, and not because you're trying to be, I don't know, somebody else, right? But you can at the same time communicate how you were hurt by that. So you don't need to yell as you probably would to your siblings, but you be able to communicate that. So there's no real difference if you're being yourself. There's no real, like, it's not like a great chance. It's just there. Just paying attention to the etiquette of your business, you can be able to match that with who you really are and how you really react or you take part to things, and just try to match that together and to give you a solution. So you can just be authentic self both at work and in school. You should know that your life is your life. Like I said, your life is your life, and cosplaying when you're at work and when you're in school and when you're in church. Obviously, like, different people bring out different parts of us, but at the same time, do not lose yourself entirely to people. Like, oh, I want to, or maybe in your workplace, there's someone who you feel is more loved than others, and they dress or speak or react to things in a particular way, and then you just want to do that just to gain that kind of things they gain. That is unnecessary. Just live your life. Just go on with your life. Be mindful of yourself. Be self-aware. Be introspective of your own life, and just match that, obviously, with the etiquette that you have professionally, and just go on about your life. So that's, like, I think the best way I can answer being authentic. Just be authentic, basically.
And I think that's a really beautiful answer to everyone trying to be themselves. Just be yourself. Disney told us. So this is the last question, and it's to both guests. And if you have any question, guys, feel free to drop us in the comment section. And after this, they'll take a few minutes to answer your question. So I guess Queen will have to answer this question first. Addressing the societal pressure of young women, particularly those in Nigeria, to navigate the expectation of womanhood and a successful career, what strategies can be employed to make informed decisions while preserving mental well-being? So this question is to our beautiful guests, both of you. So Queen, would you like to go first?
Okay. So, the societal pressure of women, I'll name a few. For instance, getting married, serving your husband, not aiming too high, all of these things. I feel like we need to communicate about these things. So I've actually like had a thought. I don't have personally, I don't have like any pressure like that in my life. So yeah, sorry. Sometimes I actually forget my age. I always think I'm 14 because adults. So but anyway, I think the way is to communicate. The most people, to me, I'm answering this without core experience to this, so forgive me. So the most people I think that have pressure that holds us down to that pressure should be our parents, right? Because even if strangers have that pressure, they don't have so much power as your parents do you. And so I think you need to communicate with your parents. We're talking about adulthood here, right? And so you're not that 10-year-old child anymore that they just say do this. And this, I'm not trying to encourage rebellion or just making your parents like feel like nothing to you, right? But you should be able to let your parents know how some certain things make you feel. And sometimes you need to like caution them nicely, positively, if that's the word. Caution them and tell them this is not helping me, right? I cannot do this. So if you're able to communicate, there's no parents that will willingly, I don't know for all the parents, obviously there are parents that are just over the roof, but no one will want to willingly make you feel so down and depressed. Let them know how these things make you feel. Communicate deeply with them. Every other person that this pressure comes from, I think you can tell them that at a distance. One thing about even pressure that we mostly don't pay attention to is internal pressure. So right now we're talking about external pressure from like parents, colleagues, strangers, whatever, people off the internet. You get married and then everybody's saying, is she pregnant already? All of those things are very unnecessary. But internal pressure is one thing that is very core to us. So we're pressuring ourselves by our own selves. We are self-sabotaging by our own selves. We are trying to. It's possible that people are not even pressuring us as much as we are pressuring ourselves. So you just feel like, oh, by now my parents expect me to be married. By now my friends expect me to be at this level. By now my secondary school mates are already doing this, and I should be able to do that. So we're internally pressuring ourselves so much that we even like the voice is so loud from inside that we can hear it from everybody. Like someone just looks at you and you feel like that's what they're saying. So we should first cover our internal pressures, and then we go out to the people that matter so much to us. And that's why I use parents as an instant, because I feel like that's like one of the people that are called to us, that their opinions matter to us, right? So we should first deal with the word inside. I'll tell this little, I don't know, encounter. So one time, I'm very religious. So one time I was praying, I was having so much pressure, anxiety, and all of that. So I was praying, I told God, like, God, please help me. I don't want to deal with this. And let me tell you, like, I felt so much peace within me. And then funny thing is, after I felt that peace, I started questioning the peace. I was like, no, there's something I'm missing. For me to be feeling this good, there's something I'm missing. Like, what am I not thinking about right now that is making me feel so much good? I was so sure that there was something that I wasn't thinking about that would give me anxiety. So this pressure, we don't even know how much we pressure our own selves. So all this societal things, some people are like, every day, if you're on Twitter, right? Every day you're always saying, I want to get married in 2014. I must get married in this. I must do this. I must. At that point, you're the one pressuring yourself. And this is not to cut down on, having goals, and you're not also cutting down on like having big dreams, expectations, all of those great, nice things, right? But we should take a step back with everything that has been spoken when Miss Mosho talked about self-awareness and all of that. So we should take a step back to understand, are we pressuring ourselves? Indicates, or should I say, indicates your stressors. What are those things that give you stress? What are those things that you feel like they are the pressures to your life, societally or whatever? So all those things that you think you should do, first of all, find the peace within yourself. And then when
Sorry, I think okay, good.
Yeah, this is how I feel truly about this, and then you'll be able to um, communicate that with other people, and then get to the feel of it. So talk to every other person, like how I don't like when you tell me this. It could even be your friends, right? I don't like when you tell me this. Miss Knutsha talked about that in setting boundaries. So tell people, I don't want this. Please, you can say it in the nicest of way. You don't have to like, please don't ever say that in your life, right? You don't have to do all of that, but you can say it in the nicest way if that's the kind of person you are, right? Just talk to people and say, I don't feel comfortable you always making jokes about this or telling me about this. Talk to them, talk to people. I feel like we're all human beings with reasoning. And so this the whole topic is about navigating adulthood. So you have to navigate. There's some work that you have to do about that. You have to be the one to steer your engine or whatever of your life. So you have to navigate that and then talk about it and help yourself. So I hope my non-experience will be able to do something.
I think everyone can relate to your answer because we all have that internal pressure that we chalk up to expectations from what we assume others want. So we would love to get your opinion, Funmto.
Yes, absolutely. Something that Quinn said earlier, which is that your life is your life, right? And that can be so hard to accept, but it shouldn't be. But it can be so hard to accept, especially given the context of the culture and the society that we live in. And like everybody's responding in the chats that internal pressure is real. It is extremely real. And again, this is where self-awareness has to come in. Right? The question is about strategies to employ when you're making informed decisions. So this is where you have to check your own decision making, right? Like, am I making a decision to satisfy XYZ? Am I making a decision to satisfy my parents? Am I making a decision to satisfy somebody? Am I making a decision to satisfy what I think is somebody's opinion of me, right? You may not even know what they're thinking, right? But it's what you think they are thinking, and then you're trying to make a decision based off of that. And a telltale sign of that is unsettledness. If you're feeling very hurried and unsettled when you're trying to make a decision, that might be an indication that, okay, maybe this thing that you're trying to decide on, or maybe this direction that you're trying to swing to is not the direction for you, right? So internal pressure is real, like we've all said and are saying in the chat. And this is where self-awareness has to come in. Let's be aware of our own decision making. Let's begin to question our motives. From a curiosity standpoint, remember I spoke about self-compassion, so you don't want to be beating yourself up, but you just want to be curious, right? You want to be curious, like, okay, what's my decision? What's my reason for making this decision? Sometimes it's in the aftermath that you recognize, right? It's after you made a decision, like, oh, I decided to do this thing because of that person. And you might notice that you're feeling uneasy, right? Start paying more attention to things like that. And then, ultimately, going back to what Queen said, that your life is your life. At the end of the day, your life is of importance. If you are not living a healthy life, if you're not living a fulfilling life, all that pressure is still going to be there, right? So the pressure to get married, the pressure to advance in your career, right, is still going to be there, right? But it's your life that is important. So the pressure may be placed on you, right? And sometimes it might not feel like we have choice to accept the pressure, but in little ways we kind of do, right? So if I want to place this notebook on somebody's head, right, there's choice to move their head away, or there's choice to keep their head there. And I know that given the nuances and context of our society, it's not always very straightforward, right? But this pressure is real. And at the end of the day, your life is your life, and you have to choose not to accept it. So I hope that answers that question.
It does beautifully well, especially recognizing the fact that it's quite easy to point out that your life is your life, but we society that is cultivated on women having to be quite emotionally out ourselves as second class citizens. So, like Funmto rightfully said, self-compassion, self-awareness, very important. So guys, at this point, if you have questions, feel free to drop them. I will read them out loud, or you can unmute yourself to ask the questions to be fair, to make it interactive. So we are done just taking questions for now. And while waiting for people to drop questions, I have a question of my own to speakers. Anyone who thinks they have the answer to this question. So one challenge I have as a professional and being female is, for the colleagues, I wouldn't call it simple, but I had lots of colleagues basically be like, oh, you probably get into this profession, start a family, or the classic, you're young, you might change your mind, so you should be in. How do we navigate having to go through those boundaries, break those glass ceilings, and still have for ourselves to accept that these particular truths might be true to them, but they're not true to ourselves?
I'm so sorry, your connection was a little...
Oh, okay. So let me repeat the question.
Yes, please.
Okay. Let me repeat the question then. How do we hold spaces for ourselves and deal with the assumptions of other people based on our sex and our age group? I think that's a very short way forward.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, the question is, how do we hold space for ourselves while still navigating like the assumptions that come with our gender and also like our age group, right?
Yeah.
I hate to sound like a broken record, but I'm going to come back to self-awareness, right? And this is where you really have to know yourself. Your question is very similar to the other question about like societal pressure. So it's like we are seeing women doing amazing things and they're shattering, glass ceilings, and they're doing, climbing up the corporate ladder and they're opening doors for us. And it's amazing to see, right? And so it's very easy to feel like, oh, that's the trajectory that I have to go, right? But if that's not the trajectory that your life is supposed to take, you would then live a miserable life if you try to follow that trajectory. So how do we create space for ourselves while navigating those, pressures of our gender and our assumed, expectations, is by knowing yourself. And knowing yourself can become something as simple as like, okay, what are my natural tendencies? What are things that I enjoy doing? Right. In one of Queen's responses, it was like, thinking back to things that you enjoy doing. What are the things that you enjoyed doing when you were little? What are the things that, people spoke to you about, that people noticed in you when you were a child? Right. I recently had a situation in a professional setting where, I was speaking to somebody and their career is going into the trajectory of entrepreneurship. And I asked a question. I was like, okay, as a child, like, do people always tell you that, like, oh, you are innovative and like, you do things on your own? And their answer was yes, right? But because that like entrepreneur spirit had always existed, but unfortunately wasn't developed, all that was in front of them was, going down the corporate ladder. They thought that that's what they had to do, and they experienced so much unfulfillment from that, right? So it's being able to identify that, okay, one person's trajectory, no matter how amazing it is, doesn't have to be mine. And it's so hard. It's so hard to do, right? Especially when you're looking to the left and looking to the right. Like, I mean, even just personally deciding to go down the route of being a therapist, I remember at some point I was like, shall I not switch to tech, but like this, like, but then I just knew, like, I knew my brain could not even fathom the thought of doing any other thing, or even fathom the thought of, like, you know, trying to learn a different career. And we know ourselves well, you know, that there's a difference between like pushing yourself to do something and like, nah, this is just not for me, right? So yeah, self-awareness really has to come in, and also just, you know, accepting that, okay, this is my path and this is another person's path. And the path that somebody else is walking on doesn't have to be my path.
True, that is so true. And thank you for that answer. It's something I will be carrying with me in my professional ventures. So we do have a question. I'm going to read it out loud. Okay. So she wants to know why communication is okay. She wants to know why communication is in regard to mental health is hard, because she feels that it is the number one reason why mental health keeps taking people to the suicide paths. So yeah.
Okay, I'd like to answer that briefly. I'd say that it's quite absurd, like I said before, that it's something that we don't even talk about. So the reason why it's hard to talk about is the stigma around it, because a lot of people think, when they always associate mental health to madness, to um, spiritual possession, you know, right from like small, we watch Nollywood movies and then the evil person gets mad, or the good person is inflicted with madness, something like that. Madness is always like this weird thing, like the spiritual stuff. And so because of all these little things, seemingly little things, the stigma is there for us. So because of the stigma around mental health, and then people talking about, for instance, bipolar disorder, people say they are possessed, or talking about anxiety or depression, people say depression is like a spirit or something. All of those things that, you know, that just makes it hard for us to associate that, because nobody wants to associate with things like that. And so because of the stigma around it, or the myth around mental health, then that's why we find it hard to communicate, and that's why it's very necessary. That's why it's very important that as people, we begin to like shatter those stigma, we begin to break down those walls that have been set up by people, and then we begin to talk about these things and let people know that this is not how these things are. So when we begin to talk about it more, seek help more, someone sees you like struggling with a mental health disorder or something, and then they see you going for actual help and then getting this help, all of this will help to like break down those walls and be able to talk about it more, like, okay, you feel this way too, I also felt this way sometime before and I seeked help, I sought help and I helped me and all of that. So when we talk about these things, it helps. When we seek help, it helps. When we communicate our feelings, it helps. So the reason why it's hard to talk about is because of the stigma around it. But then that's why we're here to, like, you know, turn things around, talk about it, and show that this stigma is not what it's meant to be, and then we'll be able to break down this.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that real quickly, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. This oftentimes the stigma exists when there's lack of knowledge, right? And when there's lack of curiosity. We as a people are very quick to label something that we don't understand, and that labeling is usually wrong, right? So if we don't understand the behavior that is being exhibited, we're going to label it through the lens that we understand, which is where the like religious labelings would then come in, right? But if we take the stance of curiosity and just compassion, like I've referred to, trying to understand somebody else's experience, then we can be able to label whatever it is appropriately. And as corny as this sounds, it starts with us, right? So it starts in the conversations that we have, it starts with leading with curiosity. If somebody's acting in a way that you find maybe not very appealing or you're not even used to, it's being curious, like, okay, I wonder why this person's acting this way, right? Instead of then forming a conclusion and then saying with that conclusion. So being curious, right? And then also challenging incorrect narratives that are around you. If you hear somebody label another person as mad, or if you hear somebody react negatively to like mental health, right, it's challenging those incorrect narratives, right? Because at the end of the day, this stigma exists and it's also on us to change that narrative. So I just wanted to add to the things that Queen said.
True. That was very cool said. So everyone, welcome to the end of this panel session. A quick sum up would be the fact that we should be more we should be self-compassion, we should open for ourselves. As Queen said, your life is your life. Don't live for anyone else. As Funmto also said, we should
Sorry, Antonia, we can't seem to hear you well. Hello?
I think it's connection issues.
Okay.
Hello?
Hello? Okay, I think it's much better now. Yeah, it's better now.
Okay, can everyone hear me now?
It's much better.
Okay. So we're giving a quick summary of what we discussed in the panel session, having self-compassion, life, mindfulness, and practices.
I think Antonia's internet is just not really doing well right now, but I'll just round it up because time is fast spent. But honestly, it has been a phenomenal session. Like so many things that have been said, I just like was nodding my head. So I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, yes. You touched on our both speakers, Funmto and Queen. You touched on very important, very practical, very salient points on different things that everybody can relate to. So whether it's, just as you were talking about, like being in the moment or, not listening to like what society wants to say you should have to be doing by this certain age. And most important, I think one of my favorite parts was when you spoke about, and both speakers talked about like the internal pressures you put on yourself, because I can relate. Like when you were talking about particularly, so when you were talking about, how like, being like a licensed therapist, like so much being an entrepreneur, like most of us didn't go to school, but like I did not go to school to be an entrepreneur. And sometimes I'm like, oh my god, yes, like I still have to like talk to myself, like you know what you're doing, like yeah, you know what you're doing. So, and even Queen, like thank you for shedding. You were very like blunt, and I really loved that. So thank you for just being open, making this a safe space, for sharing so openly. I know Antonia is not here, but like she did very well as well, guiding the conversation, stirring the conversation with so many amazing questions and flowing with our speakers. So thank you so much.